I would like to start by asking you, how do you define a skillful communicator nowadays?
I suppose it's a very good question. At one level it's quite hard to say that this is it and this isn't. I suppose for starters, if you want to be a skillful communicator, you really need to know what your what your message is. So you need to have done whatever topic it is that you're going to talk about. You need to really know the ins and outs of that. So in a way, if you haven't done your homework, then whatever skills you might have to bring it across, it's gonna fall flat, because that's gonna come through that you haven't really got a good sense or really good grasp of the topic that you're speaking about. So that's really the first key point, I think, because from that comes conviction, comes awareness, persuasiveness, because you really know what you're talking about. So that's the content side. I think on the delivery side, in terms of real skills that make a skillful communicator, is being really aware of how you can use particular devices as part of your speech, particular tactics, rhetorical tactics, you might say. So things like framing, storytelling, using anecdotes, or using lists. So as I'm doing now, 1, 2, 3, to really get your audience zoomed in terms of a particular set of messages that you want to convey. So use those techniques, and also use your entire body as you're communicating. So one of the also most interesting learning points for myself was to see that the skill of communicating often lies on using your entire body. So using your gestures, using your facial expressions, using whatever you've been endowed with, you might say, as part of your communication, as opposed to being very still, just being rigid in terms of your delivery. So I would say those 3 things. So be prepared in terms of content, use those rhetorical devices that I mentioned, and also make sure that in the delivery you use as much as possible your facial expressions and your gestures.
Last month in your communication at RSM Leadership Summit, you referred to aspects that really matter to produce a persuasive speech. So you talked about preparedness and passion. In your opinion, I must ask you, why do you consider these specific elements so important?
Yeah, well, it comes out of some research that we did looking at entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs are people who start a new business. They often, sooner or later, as part of that process of starting a business, you need to get some funding to take it to the next level and to grow your business. So you need to, in particular, convince investors. That could be angel investors, could be venture capitalists, whoever those investors are. You need to convince them that they need to finance your venture so that you can take it to that next level. And as part of research on those types of pitches to investors, we've seen in past research that those 2 aspects, so the preparedness, so to what extent you've have a good business plan in place, to what extent you really have a good grasp of the market that you're looking at, you've done your financial projections, you've got a good team in place. So there's a couple of aspects that an entrepreneur needs to have done, that he or she will have to have done and needs to demonstrate as part of the speech. So that's the preparedness side, and the passion side is more to do with what I just talked about, the delivery. So it's these particular techniques that you can use to bring your message across as far as your speech is concerned, but it's also to do with your body language. So one particular aspect that previous research has found is that if you're just more animated, so if you use more body language, in general that's going to be seen to be more passionate, and by extension that means that you're going to be more persuasive, which then means that an investor is more likely to invest in your venture. What we're doing in some current research is looking at not just whether it's more body language that matters, but really looking at whether it's particular types of body language that matter. So it's not just more gesturing, but it's whether certain types of gestures really have an impact in terms of engaging your audience, conveying particular meanings that you want to convey, being seen to be more persuasive in general. And And there we find that there's some really key differences. So that obviously that begs for further research, but it really shows that we need to get a much better sense of how these different aspects of body language help convince an audience, in this case investors, to support support the person who's speaking, so to support an entrepreneur in this case.
Okay. Are the axioms of communication proposed by the Palo Alto School still accurate, or in your opinion, do they need to be refurbished?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So some of the work that we're basing these studies with entrepreneurs on is really work in cognitive science and cognitive linguistics that looks at I suppose what they call the cognitively unconscious. So how we gesture, and obviously now I'm consciously aware of the fact that I'm gesturing, but most of the time we're not. Nonetheless, whenever we're gesturing, we're also indicating or communicating certain intentions. We might be conveying particular meanings. And oftentimes these gestures may be as important as your speech. There's even some research suggesting that it may be more important in terms of drawing in an audience, conveying a particular set of meanings than the speech that I'm using. So that, I suppose, thinking about those Palo Alto axioms is that for sure you cannot not communicate. Even when you're sitting still, you're communicating something. But then, I suppose more specifically, as you're using your body, you are directly communicating intentions, certain meanings that will be picked up. And that's then the relative sort of comparison between speech and gestures. In some cases, body language or gestures may be more important than the speech that we're using. And I think it's hard to really make a really strong point out of it, but I think people are starting to realize in different fields in the social sciences that these aspects are becoming more important again. So the Palo Alto axioms must be from 1957, I think, that book, so it's a long time ago. But now, across many different fields, you see that that's obviously triggered by lots of different developments in these different fields, but the embodied aspect of communication is generally becoming seen to be more important again.
Talking a little bit more about this edition of SOPCOM, this Congress. So the main theme of this Congress is communication and social transformations. So I want to ask you, in your opinion, what changes are occurring as we speak that impact organizational communication the most?
Another good question. Well, obviously there's the digital revolution, social media, and that is affecting communication within organizations, but also communication between organizations and stakeholder groups. So it's definitely the media landscape has changed quite a bit, and with these different media come obviously different types of communication. That also means that we need to rethink as academics and as practitioners how these media types and how we're communicating through and with them, how they work, so what principles, what theories, if you're looking at it from an academic perspective, still apply in that particular context. So one aspect that I'm going to talk about this afternoon, or that I'm briefly going to mention, is some work that I've been doing with colleagues where we're looking at a social enterprise that is primarily relying on social media to reach out to a whole range of different audiences, but including buyers, communities, but also general citizens who they hope are going to think about the issues that they're working on. And because they use primarily social media like Twitter and Facebook, what we found is that some of our, you might say, our old principles or theories around strategic messaging, framing, they don't really fit something like Twitter anymore. So Twitter is more, the closest, or at least in my own reflection on this, the closest that you theoretically can think about it is more in terms of speech acts that are being used, so like announcements, declarations, expressives that through which you hope that an audience will respond and will retweet or will do something with a message. But even that suggestion that it's speech acts and not framing or sort of classic theories of strategic messaging, that really is quite a fundamental observation in the sense that a tool like that forces us to really think or rethink what the basis of the organizational communication processes might be.
Next, you will do your presentation about corporate communication. What message would you like these communication students to get from?
I think the main message is to be, I suppose, positive and passionate about the jobs that they're going to move into. Wherever I am in the world, you see particularly corporate and organizational communications growing. So lots of new master programs, executive programs also. So there's a lot of interest in the area. And that in a way reflects the interest that there is in the business world, in society at large. So that means that there's going to be plenty of opportunities, which is always nice to know as a student that there's going to be a job at the end of your degree. But there's also a lot of, it's a very exciting community to be moving into because it's, we talked about digital media. That's a very interesting development that is sort of rewriting the field. There's also interesting new developments where you might say the fields of PR and marketing, particularly on the corporate side, are really converging. So there's something new emerging in that convergence between these fields that is, as we speak, is morphing into something. So I think it's a very exciting time to be moving into this field. There's a lot of development, a lot of new challenges. So you'll definitely never sit still. There will always be a challenge on your hands that you will have on your hands. Just be very positive and passionate and enjoy working in that particular profession.
What do you think about events like SOPCOM?
I think they're very important. I'm also very happy that apparently I'm here to speak specifically about corporate and organizational communication in the sense that in Portugal the Communication Science Association is quite young. And like in many other countries, it sort of grew out of mass communication and public opinion research. And it's only later that more professional areas like corporate or organizational communication well, PR is maybe a bit different, but before those were being recognized. So I think it's good in general to come together and to strengthen our ties as academics, the ties that we've got with each other, to share research and to share ideas. But I'm also particularly happy that corporate communications and organizational communication is being recognized and that there's at least a little place for it as part of this conference to give it some attention.
Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.